At midnight, a majestic white mare gallops through a vast wheat field, leaving a trail of glowing light behind her. The next morning, an old farmer calls his 3 sons to show them the devastated state of his wheat field. As his only source of income is being destroyed, he orders his sons to keep watch at night in the hopes of catching the culprit. The brothers delegate this responsibility to the youngest, named John. He is afraid of the dark and knows that the task is immense, but in order to gain his father's trust, he agrees to keep watch at night. John starts a friendly conversation with the hedgehog he had rescued earlier. While chatting, he sees the silhouette of the mare and quickly throws a rope in her direction. Suddenly, the rope tightens, and the mare begins to pull John through the fields. In one moment, he is even pulled into the sky, from where he can see the beautiful village. John is mesmerized by the view and starts shouting with joy. But his happy moment ends abruptly when the mare falls, and they end up in a swamp. John manages to free himself, but the mare remains trapped. Seeing the poor animal drowning, John forgets his mission and tries to help her. He attempts to pull the giant mare alone, but the beast does not budge. So, he activates a nearby windmill and ends up saving her. The mare, overwhelmed with gratitude, sheds a tear that deeply touches John. He then frees the mare from her chains, making her promise that she will no longer trample his fields. After the mare departs, John looks at the desolate wheat field and realizes he will have to bear the consequences of the destruction. The next day, John wakes up in the stable, marveling at the sight of 2 magnificent black royal horses. While admiring these creatures, he hears a voice in the background that startles him. Reacting quickly, he grabs a pitchfork and tries to defend himself. But when he approaches the source of the noise, John is surprised to find a small magical hunchbacked colt that can miraculously speak like a human. The colt informs John that the mare he encountered earlier is his mother, and she gifted these 2 horses to him, with the colt coming along to support John. Shortly after, the old farmer screams in despair at the sight of the ruined wheat field, causing John to panic. Sensing the precarious situation, the colt acts quickly, carrying John on his back while they run away from the field at great speed. Along the way, John expresses his desire to sell the horses for the necessary funds, but the colt once again agrees to help and lets out a sharp whistle, summoning the horses to his side before John's family can capture them. Now, with the majestic horses, the group sets off on a journey to the bustling market town, hoping to find a suitable buyer. Upon arrival, John is bombarded with offers from eager buyers vying for the chance to own the royal horses. However, due to greed, he decides to keep the animals and only sell them to the wealthiest person in the area. This person turns out to be none other than the king. As John walks near the grand palace, the king spots the horses and becomes entranced. But instead of buying them like a gentleman, he orders his men to capture them, saying that a poor farmer like John could never have purchased the horses on his own. Feeling disheartened and broke, John turns to the colt for help. The colt once again whistles, summoning the horses back to John's side, but during the process, the animals knock the king over into a nearby sack of flour. Despite the king's anger, he maintains his composure in front of the gathered crowd. John then proposes a trade, requesting 2 silver hats in exchange for the horses. However, one of the king's courtiers reminds him that the horses are destined to run back to John. Taking that into account, the king offers him the prestigious position of the most important caretaker of the palace. John is elated to have received such an opportunity, so he accepts without a second thought, and due to the announcement, the entire crowd begins to applaud him. They believe he is an animal whisperer. As John gains more and more popularity among the people, the king becomes increasingly jealous of him and tries to find a way to execute him. However, he cannot find a valid reason for it. But one day, his courtier gives him an idea. According to his plan, he should send John on a mission to capture the legendary Firebird. Since it is an impossible task, John will surely fail, and this can be used as justification to execute him. Upon hearing this, the king agrees with this wicked idea and sends the order. When John learns about the mission, he becomes determined to complete it. The colt warns him that the Firebird has never been tamed by anyone and that this may prove to be an impractical task, but John is determined to impress the villagers, so the 2 set off on their journey. Along the way, they venture into the forest to collect some dream nuts to attract the Firebird. John is curious and wants to try the nuts, but the colt forbids him from eating them, warning him that they act as a sedative. Next, They walk all day and finally reach an oasis in the desert, which is the dwelling place of the firebird. There, they see a warning about the presence of quicksand. Nonetheless, John throws the dream nuts and hides nearby. After a while, the majestic bird emerges from the ground and begins to eat the nuts. According to the plan, the nuts begin to intoxicate the bird, but before it falls asleep, it notices movement and starts to attack. John and the colt come close to dying numerous times, but they always save each other. The entire landscape is also destroyed due to the ensuing chase, but in the end, the nuts finally bring down the firebird, allowing John to capture it with chains. The next day, John and the colt find the firebird looking weak and shedding a fiery tear. The colt explains that the bird can only be warm when it is free. If it remains on the ground for too long, it loses all its energy. Upon hearing this, John feels pity for the bird, so he decides to free it. As soon as he removes the chains, the beast regains its fire and flies into the sky, but not without leaving a feather of fire for John. Now that the mission has failed, the colt suggests they not return to the kingdom, as this may result in John's execution. However, our courageous yet stubborn protagonist believes the fire feather will prove they captured the firebird. Upon returning, the king orders their execution, as expected. John tries to prove his innocence, explaining that he captured the bird but released it out of compassion. However, the king refuses to believe his story, and as he raises an axe to deliver the final blow, the majestic firebird appears, casting a bright light over the kingdom. It heard John's cries for help and has now come to return the favor. The people are astonished to see the firebird following John's orders, and thus the king reluctantly allows John to live and also organizes a banquet in his honor. That night, John is celebrated as a hero in the kingdom. As the king's frustration grows, he is urged by his courtier to send John on another impossible task to retrieve the king's maiden, who resides in an ice kingdom atop a rock. The king is convinced that John will fail, thus giving him a reason to execute him. Thus, the next day, a messenger announces the king's new task for John, who accepts the challenge without hesitation. After climbing the perilous mountains, John and the colt finally reach the entrance of the palace where the king's maiden resides. However, they discover that the palace is blocked by a massive wall of ice, making entry impossible. With the help of the feather given by the firebird, John manages to melt the ice barrier, causing a torrent of water. Unfortunately, this freezes the colt into a ball of ice, making it tumble down the slope. The fall is harsh, but he manages to survive unscathed. Meanwhile, John enters the palace, where he meets the Empress. He introduces himself as a suitor sent by the king, but the Empress says she is not interested in marrying, as there are no remaining heroes to test her bravery. She jumps off a cliff, and John immediately follows to rescue her. Impressed by his courage, the Empress uses her dress as a parachute and begins to descend slowly. But at that moment, John accidentally pierces the dress, causing both to fall at great speed. It seems like they are going to die painfully, but the colt appears with a new pair of wings and saves them. Later that night, the three camp in the middle of the forest before continuing their journey back to the kingdom. During this time, the colt advises John to abandon the Empress and flee to save himself, but he refuses. The Empress, who has been eavesdropping on the conversation, is confused by John's loyalty. The next morning, the trio arrives in the kingdom, where John is received with a hero's welcome. Everyone is surprised to see that John has returned from his mission alive, which only fuels the growing resentment of the king towards him. Despite this, the king feels compelled to reward him once again. That night, John confides in the colt about his feelings for the Empress and decides to visit her. He picks some flowers and climbs up to her window, but their reunion is interrupted when some courtiers enter with clothes for her to wear. After some time, the Empress finally meets the king and is disappointed to discover he is the same age as her father. Outside, John feels jealous seeing the two together. The king wants to marry the Empress the next day, but she is reluctant. To delay this, she mentions that it is her family's heritage to marry with a special ring, but unfortunately, the ring has been lost in the ocean. Upon hearing this, the king becomes furious and sends John on yet another impossible task. That same night, while the colt reflects on John's erratic behavior, he sees the spirit of a whale hovering in the sky. The colt talks to the sun, the moon, and the wind, and discovers that the ring is inside the belly of a huge whale, which is now transformed into an island. In the early hours of the day, John and the colt set off on a journey to find the whale, only to discover that it is bound by chains. The colt manages to communicate with the whale and learns that it was placed in this situation by some sailors as punishment. Its crime was devouring several ships for fun. At that time, it was young and naive, but now regrets its actions. Shortly after, the whale sheds a tear, which gives John the idea to make it sneeze and break the chains. So, they enter the whale's nostrils and tickle it with the tips of the colt's feathers. The plan works, and the great mammal starts writhing to scratch itself. In the process, it breaks free from all its chains and also releases the ships that had been trapped for decades. The whale then rewards John and the colt with the precious ring as a gesture of gratitude. In the next scene, the two make their way back to the Empress's window to deliver the ring. However, their presence does not go unnoticed, as the guards and courtiers see them through a scope and rush to capture John. The commotion wakes the king, who grabs his weapon and rushes to the window. Upon seeing the colt, the king shoots it without hesitation. Meanwhile, the guards invade the room and arrest John, falsely accusing him of kidnapping the king's maiden. After that, the king prepares to marry the empress, but to buy more time, she demands that he rejuvenate himself through a recipe passed down from generation to generation by her grandmother. She insists that he bathe in 3 cauldrons, one with boiling water, the second with cold water, and the third with boiling milk. The plan is clever but results in even deeper problems for John. Realizing it could be a trap, a courtier advises the king to test the cauldrons on John before undergoing the process himself. That night, the empress confides in the colt that she knows how to nullify the effects of the boiling contents. She reveals that throwing her grandmother's ring into the first cauldron, a feather from the firebird into the second, and the flower of life and death, which grows at the end of the world, into the third cauldron, will cancel the lethal effects. She asserts that the third may be the hardest to find. She claims that John's survival depends on successfully completing this plan. The colt, who was wounded by the previous shot, knows this is a treacherous mission that could result in his death, but for the sake of his best friend, he sets out to find the flower. Since he can no longer fly, he uses his lightning speed to travel to the end of the world. The colt eventually finds the flower, but it warns him that whoever picks it will be awaiting death. Despite the ominous warning, the colt picks the flower to save John. The next morning, the king, hypocritically, declares that he is giving John a chance for redemption and orders him to jump into the cauldrons. John believes he is about to die, so he boldly professes his love for the empress. He then jumps into the boiling water, and at the same time, the empress successfully places the ring into the first cauldron, helping John emerge unscathed. In the second cauldron, the firebird drops a feather, keeping John safe once again. Meanwhile, the colt delivers the flower just in time to save John in the third and final cauldron. After successfully completing his rejuvenation, John appears before the empress, who is amazed by his transformation. The king is also shocked and believes that the recipe truly makes people younger, so he jumps into the first cauldron. However, as soon as he does, a huge bubble emerges and sweeps him away. The people of the kingdom merely laugh at his misfortune and begin to chant John's name. Meanwhile, the empress and John notice that the colt is missing, so they begin to search for him. They soon find him sitting patiently, waiting for his death as he picked the flower. However, the empress reveals that the warning from the flower was merely a test to assess the bravery of the one who picked it. She could have told him this before he left. She also clarifies that if the colt had not picked it, he would have truly died, but now he will not. Upon hearing this, the colt stands up joyfully and embraces his best friend. In the final scene, the crowd cheers for John, demanding that he become the new king. He happily agrees and promises to protect the kingdom with all his strength. The film ends with John and the empress finally marrying and taking over the kingdom as the new king and queen.